Let's get started with this warm-up. That should have been plenty of time for you to get it done. In order to graph this inequality, we need to know a few things. Cam? We need to know that it'll be a dashed line. What else do we need to know? We're going to shade above on this one because it's a greater than symbol. And then, of course, we actually need to know where the line goes using what and what? M and B. So today, I'm not necessarily going to write out M equals B equals above, below, dash, solid every single time, just because it is time consuming and we should be used to this process by now. So, we are going to start our line where? 1 on the y-axis. From there, we're going to go up to right 1 or down to left 1. And what type of line? We already said it was going to be a dashed line. Dashed. Oop, that one got a little wonky. And we said we're going to shade above that line. Questions about where above is? Okay, so today what we're doing is solving a system of linear inequalities. So much like when we had a system of equations, instead of just having one of them, we had two of them. Same thing today. Instead of one inequality, we have two at a time that we're going to be graphing. We will talk about what the answer or solution is going to look like on these graphs in a minute. Anybody need more time on the warm-up or objective? Okay. This review, we just did a warm-up problem, so I don't know that we need to review this whole problem. If you really want to jot down these notes, you can. But again, I think many of you still remember them from 5.6. The first thing we do is graph the boundary line using your slope and your y-intercept, M and B. When do we know to use a solid line? Okay, when the symbol has an equal to bar on it. So greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. That's when we know to use a solid line. When do we know to use a dashed line? Okay, when it doesn't have that, when it's just the regular greater than or less than sign. Then we have to know where to shade. We're going to shade above if we have what kind of symbol? Some sort of greater than symbol. So just the plain greater than or the greater than or equal to. We'll shade below if it's a less than symbol. Either one, less than or equal to. Okay, so again, if you had those notes down in 5.6 and you don't need that refresher, that's fine. If you weren't here for 5.6 and you were wondering what in the world we were talking about on that last slide for the warm-up, this is the review. We're going to skip the review problem on this slide just because we have plenty of examples for today to go through, as you can see. Anybody need more time on the review slide? Well, then on we go. I am going to edit this slide just a little bit as we go through it. The blanks at the top are all fine. That's all what we want it to be. I just need to change a couple equation words to the word inequality instead. It won't make a huge difference if you don't change that in your notes, but anywhere you see the word equation on your notes, it really should say inequality today. So a system of linear inequalities is a set of two or more linear inequalities with the same variable using one of the inequality symbols. So we've got an example of two inequalities shown here. Again, kind of like when we did systems of equations, but now they have a different symbol, not an equal sign. The solution is a feasible region that contains the overlap of the set of solutions to both inequalities in the system. I'm hearing some flipping, so I'm guessing we're ready to continue. Almost. We're good? All right. Now on this first slide, for example 1, I did put some little notes off to the side about the steps we're going to take. I don't know that you need to write them down. If you really want to write out in words what's going to happen, you can. But we'll at least talk about it. The first thing we're going to do is graph the first inequality, making sure that we shade lightly. I'll explain why that's important when we go through it. Then we'll graph the second inequality on the same plane, again, shading lightly. The next thing to do is find where the shading overlaps. So where did we shade for both inequalities? And we want to shade that section only darker. The dark section that we shade at the end is considered the answer, or the feasible region, or the set of all points that work for both inequalities. So let's walk through these steps one at a time. First, we're going to graph the top inequality. I'll graph the top one in red and the bottom one in blue, just so that we can tell them apart. If you don't have two colors, you don't need two colors. It's fine. I just think it's easier to see on the board if we do it that way. So for the top one, where am I putting my first point? -1 on the y-axis. From there, I'm going to go up to right 1. We're using our M and B slope and y-intercept to make some points. If I get tired of going up and right, I can go down and left. The line that I put through those points should be dashed or dotted, because there is not an equal to bar on the inequality symbol. We are going to shade above or below? Below. Why below? It's got a less than symbol. If you're not sure where above versus below is, you can put your finger on the line somewhere, anywhere. Pull it straight down, and that area is considered below. So, shade. Again, we're going to shade lightly for now. So, just kind of real light shading in that area. Part of the reason that we have to shade lightly, especially for the first one, is so that we can still see our grid lines, because we still need to graph a whole nother inequality. So you want to shade nice and light so that you can still see your grid lines through the shading. Let's graph the second inequality. My starting point for this one is going to go up 4 on the y-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4. From there, I will go down 1. Which way to? Over which way? If I go down, I have to go right. If you said it, I just didn't hear you. That's why I asked a second time. And if we go up, we should go left. the line that I put through these points should be dashed because there is not an equal to bar. Dashed line here. And I should be shading above. Now, when we shade for the second line, you have to ignore the first one. Ignore the fact that there's a line there. Ignore the fact that there's some shading there. And we are just focusing on shading above the second line. Again, making sure it's nice and light. You still want to be able to see the other line. We don't want to make it really dark so that we can't see what we did before. The next step is to find where the shading overlaps. So you might be able to see that we've created a few different sections. We created one section over here, a second one up here, third one here, fourth one down here. Where does the shading overlap, Kennedy? In section 3 is where they overlap. Now, the numbering is arbitrary, meaning I just started numbering. I could have called this 1, 2, 3, and 4. I just started somewhere and numbered. The numbers don't matter. I just used the numbers so that we could communicate with each other. So this section here is where the shading should be made darker because that is my answer. If all of your shading looks to be about the same color and you don't go over your answer section darker, you're not going to get all your points. I need to know for sure what section you are telling me is your answer section. This section contains all of the points, x, comma, y's, that would work in both of these inequalities at the same time. Questions about example 1? Concerns? Confusion? Need more time? We're ready for another one? On we go. All right, another system. Again, I'll use 2 different colors. It's not essential. I just think it helps on the board. For my top inequality, where's my first point going to go? Up 3 on the y-axis, and from there I will go good, up 6 right 1, or down 6 left 1. Now on a problem where your slope is kind of big like this one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's okay if you can only fit a couple points. Especially on those homework worksheets that I've been giving you, sometimes it's only possible to get 2 points. That's fine. You can still put a line through them. My line this time should be anybody? Solid because it's got an equal to bar. Arrows on the ends. And I should be shading below. Again, the steeper your line, the trickier it is to tell. So put your finger somewhere on the line and then drag it straight down. That's considered the below side. So here is below. Are we ready for the second line? For the second line, where am I putting my first point? -2 on the y-axis. From there I could go up 1 right 1, or down 1 left 1. my line would be what kind of line? A solid line through those points. It's not great. That's a little better. And I'm going to shade above or below? Below that line. So below this line is everywhere down here. Remember, when I shade for my second line, I kind of have to ignore the first one, but I don't want to shade too dark because I want to still see it. We again have created a few sections with these lines. I'll start numbering here this time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, the numbers are arbitrary. It's just used for us to communicate. In this case, which of these sections is the overlap? Section 4. Okay. So when you do your darker shading, use your boundary lines as a guide. Meaning I'm not going to cross over into the little 1 section. I use that boundary line as a guide. And that section is the one that gets shaded in darker as my answer. Tyson. Because that is where, I take it away a little, that's where I shaded both, in my case, blue and purple. That's where I shaded both colors. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the one where the shading overlapped. Anything else? Questions, concerns? No? We're good? Okay. Go ahead and try number 3 on your own, and we'll talk about it in a minute. If you get done with 3, or you've already done 3, and you want to try 4, you can, but I will warn you that 4 is a special situation. But we'll talk about it in a minute. All right, on number 3, where did we start the top line? On the -3 on the y-axis. From there, we should go up to right 1, or down to left 1. Again, I'm hoping that this whole graphing a line has become so repetitive that you are just fantastic at it. Our line through those points should be a dashed line. And we should be shading below, or the bottom part, which would be this section down here. Remember to shade kind of lightly. We don't want to shade it in too dark. That might be better. Okay, questions about graphing or shading for the top part? For the bottom one, where does our first point go? Up 3, +3 on the y-axis. From there, where do we go? Down for right 1, or up for left 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we are. And the line through those points should be a solid line because we've got the equal to bar. We should be shading below that line. Now again, if you're not sure where below is, put your finger somewhere on the line and then pull it straight down the page. That whole section where your finger landed is considered below. So below is over here this time. So where directionally, like top, bottom, left, right, middle? Middle where? Bottom middle is where we see the overlap. In my case, I use both pink and purple. That's the only place where they overlap. That little Last hour, somebody called it a little Dorito. A little piece of pie. Okay, triangle. That little shape down at the bottom middle is where they overlapped. Questions about 3. Concerns, confusion, need more time. Okay, then we'll move on. We are going to talk about number 4. After number 4, we'll probably skip ahead. But 4 is a special situation, so I do want to talk about it. For now, let's just act like it's any old problem. Where am I going to start my first line? Negative 1 on the y-axis. My slope tells me to go down 1, right 1, or up 1, left 1. My line through those points should be a dashed or dotted line. And where would we shade for that line? Below, because it's a less than sign. So below for this one is going to be this space down here. Okay, we move on to the other inequality. We start our line at positive 4 on the y-axis. Where do we go to get more points? Down 1, right 1. Our slope is also negative 1 over 1 on this one. And our line through these points should be another dashed line. Where should we be shading? Above. And what do we notice?
They don't cross over.
They don't cross each other this time. So if they do not overlap at all, what do you think the answer is? There is no solution. No solution. Now, infinitely many solutions, I don't know that we'll ever really see any. For infinitely many solutions, they would have to overlap absolutely everywhere. And I don't know that that happens very often. So, we'll see no solution. If we see an infinitely many, I'll point it out. But those are strange ones. Technically, on any one where there is a solution, there are infinitely many because our graph could be extended and there would be even more points. But anyway, there are also definitely no solution problems like this one right here. In 5th hour, somebody asked, so if I know that the slope is going to be the same, does that mean automatically there will be no solution? And to that, I said no. Because we could have shifted the red line up and the blue line down, and then we would have ended up with some shading in the middle. So make sure that you are not deciding if there is or is not a solution until you have graphed both of them. Questions about example 4? All right, we are going to skip ahead to example 7. There are some on that back page that we need to get through today so that you are capable of doing your in-class assignment tomorrow. We have a quiz coming up on Tuesday of next week. We are not going to do one giant cumulative test for this chapter. We had the quiz, we had the class, we'll have another quiz, and then we'll move on to our next chapter. All right, on example 7, what's special about that top line? There's only one variable there. That variable is y. That makes this a horizontal line. No, you don't have to write it, but for those of you who didn't recognize it, you might want to. This horizontal line will start on the y-axis at 4, and it will go which direction? Left to right. Horizontal lines go left to right. And this line will be solid because it's got that equal to bar. Where will we shade? Above, because it is a greater than symbol. What's special about the second line? It what?
It's out of order.
It's out of order. It is not in slope-intercept form, which means you get to put it in slope-intercept form. Lucky you. So, in order for this to get into slope-intercept form, what needs to move? The x term. So we will subtract 1/2 x. Can I combine the 4 with the negative 1/2? No, those are not like terms, so don't do it. We end up with y is greater than negative 1/2 x plus 4. Now you're ready to graph it. Your first point will be positive 4 on the y-axis, and then you will go down 1, right 2, down 1, right 2, down 1, right 2, or up 1, left 2, up 1, left 2, up 1, left 2. Your line through those points should be a dashed line. There is no equal to bar. So we put in a dashed line, and we are going to shade above that dashed line because we had a greater than symbol. Remember, I'm only paying attention to my second line when I do that. I kind of ignore my first line, but I don't want to shade too dark because I want to be able to see it still. Where, top, bottom, left, right, middle, do they overlap? Top right and a little bit into the left. So this trapezoid shape here. So that's where we should be shading it in darker. To number 8. What is special about number 8? They're both out of order. Neither of these are ready to be graphed yet. So we'll start with the top one and deal with it. Then we'll worry about the second one. How am I going to put this in slope-intercept form? Subtract x on both sides. And then divide by 3. If you need to see a number in front of the x, what would it be? 1, or a negative 1 in this case. So y is less than or equal to negative 1/3 x minus 1. Okay, let's graph it. Where does it start? Negative 1 on the y-axis. From there, we should go down 1, right 3, down 1, right 3, down 1, right 3, or up 1 and left 3, up 1, left 3, up 1, left 3. The line through those points should be solid, because that one has the equal to bar. I can't seem to get it. There it is. We are going to shade y below. Because it's less than, we shade below that line. Questions about it? Because I'm hearing some little voices, so I'm wondering if there are questions or if we just need a reminder to be quiet during notes. Seeming like the second one. All right, let's graph the second equation. But before we can, we need it in slope-intercept form. Subtract the 4x on both sides, and then divide by 3. So we have y is greater than negative 4/3 x plus 2. Start your graph at positive 2 on the y-axis. From there, you should go down 4 right 3, or you could go up 4 left 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Your line through those points should be, it should be dashed because there is not an equal to bar on that inequality. And we are going to shade. Somebody said it. Above this line. Okay, we're kind of ignoring the red line when we do that. Is our overlap a big section or a little section? Little section on the, which side? Right side. Little section on the right side is the only place where we shaded both colors. So that is where I'll color it in just a little darker. Questions about number 8? Are we sure? We need to move on to number 9 because 9 throws us another curveball. Are we ready for that? No, why not? Let's give it a try. All right. The first equation on this one, or inequality on this one, is not a curveball. The first one is just like the last slide. We need to subtract the x and then divide by 2. Writing catch up to the words. So y is less than or equal to negative 1/2 x minus 3. My starting point. Negative 3 on the y-axis. From there, I'm going.
Down 2, right 1.
Whoa.
I mean, down 1, right 2.
Down 1, right 2. Or
Or up 1, left 2.
up 1, left 2. My line through these points should be a solid line. And I should shade below because it's a less than. Now the second line is where we end up with a little bit of a curveball. So let's look at it. Starts off the same. To get y alone, I should. What moves first? Subtract the 5x on both sides. The 2y has what sign on it? A negative. So that's a negative 2y greater than or equal to negative 5x minus 6. The next thing I have to do, and if you were paying attention yesterday, 2 days ago, yesterday, one of your classmates gave us a heads up about this. What happens? We got to switch the symbol because we divided by a negative. So the inequality symbol has to flip around, which means your shading is going to be different than what you might have thought at the beginning. You should not decide on your shading until it's in slope-intercept form. Questions about what I mean by that? So this is what we graph. This is what tells us where to shade. My first point should go positive 3 on the y-axis. From there, more points will go up 5, right 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right 2, or down 5, left 2. Down 5, left 2. My line will be, what kind of line? A solid line. And I will shade. Ooh. Oh, so here's the debate. Should it be above or below?
Oh, yeah, below.
Why below? It's less than when it's in the correct form. So go by when you got it in the right form. Then it's less than, and you shade below. But even after we've got all that figured out, we still need to know where they meet or intersect or overlap, which would be bottom, kind of in the middle, sort of goes into the right side. So here is my overlap that I shade in darker. Questions about 9? I'll get your homework. All right, let's go ahead and do 10 together. Well, I'll give you a minute to try 10, and then we'll talk about it. So, we just talked about it a little bit. Before the symbol flips, though, we will move the 4x by subtracting it. Negative y is greater than or equal to negative 4x minus 3. When we divide by a negative 1, all the signs flip, including that symbol. So it becomes less than or equal to 4x plus 3. Questions about rewriting it? For Marion, where do we start?
On the 3. What about the 3 on the y-axis?
Positive 3 on the y-axis. Then we go
Up 4 right 1.
up 4 right 1 or
Down 4 left 1.
down 4 left 1. And our line through these points should be
Solid.
a solid line. We are going to shade below this line. Make sure you're basing your shading off of when it's in slope-intercept form. Questions, concerns? All right. Once we get the first one done, we should be working on the second one. Are we ready? We have a question? Okay. Second one, not a whole lot to do, but we do need to move what? We need to move the x term. So this becomes y is greater than or equal to negative 2x minus 3. We do not need to flip the symbol because we did not divide by a negative. Our starting point will go negative 3 on the y-axis. We get more points by going down 2 right 1 or up 2 left 1. And our line should be solid because we had that equal to bar. And we are going to shade above. So this is above that line. Where do we overlap? The whole, pretty much the whole right. You know, that's a giant section on the right where they overlap. So that's where we should shade it. Oop, I got a little. Use your boundary lines and maybe block off the section before you make it darker so that way you don't accidentally shade something you shouldn't. What questions do we have?